folks. Jon Stewart, after 17 years, saying he is planning to leave Comedy Central's The Daily Show. There's been lots of movement in the media industry, certainly when it comes to the folks.
I'm making a Jon Stewart face over there. My eyes are popping out.
Yeah, certainly in terms of the people that we see on air. So we want to talk a little bit more about what's going on in the media industry. Brad Adgate is Director of Research at Horizon Media on the phone in New York. Here in our studio is Bloomberg News' media reporter Gerry Smith, and out in Morgantown, West Virginia, is Elizabeth Cohen. She's Assistant Professor of Communication Studies at West Virginia University. Gerry, I want to start with you because those of us who cover media, are in the media, it's kind of been a buffet of news for us.
Yeah, it was actually there was a lot happening last night. I mean, over the course of an hour, NBC
says, like, can't you leave me alone?
Yeah, it's been busy for media reporters. I mean, Brian Williams being suspended for 6 months, and Jon Stewart, stepping aside, or saying that he's going to step aside. There's a lot of people today that are sort of talking about those two events and sort of what they mean in the big picture. A lot of people, especially the younger generation, relied on Jon Stewart to get their news, while a much older generation was relying on the evening news anchors. And a lot of people sort of wonder, well, what is the future of the evening news anchor in this day and age where a lot of people relied on Jon Stewart to get their information?
If I could paraphrase or channel Jon Stewart to Elizabeth Cohen, isn't that nuts that people would think of a comedian as one of the most trustworthy news anchors in America?
I actually don't think it's nuts at all. I mean, if you think about what Jon Stewart was doing, it wasn't just reporting the news and making fun of it. He was actually being really, really cynical towards the process of journalism itself. And in a weird way, I think that actually made him seem a little bit more trustworthy than all of the news sources that he was making fun of. I don't think it's any coincidence that we've seen sort of this decline in ratings for nightly news at the same time that we see this rise in what people are calling infotainment news sources.
Brad Adgate, what do you make of the evolution? And I bring it up because I think how many times people come on Bloomberg Radio and they say, well, hey, check us out because we were on Jon Stewart. Yeah. And pick your top political figures. They all make the rounds there. Your top business leaders. I mean, they all go to Jon Stewart.
Yeah, I mean, he has a great bunch of guests. People have come out and written the books, or who starred in movies, or who are in the political headlines. I mean, Mike Huckabee was on a few weeks ago because he came out with a book and was leaving Fox News and may run for president. And that's good for the news. But I think where Jon Stewart really took off was a study done by Pew that came out in about 2006, where they said that 18 to 29-year-olds got news from Saturday Night Live and Jon Stewart, and that really catapulted him and put him into the mainstream. I mean, if you look at his numbers back in 2000, he was doing about 500,000 viewers a night, and 6-7 years later, that number was tripled, and he's been able to hold that, although there's been a little dip the last few years. But when there's an election year, his highest rated years are 2008 and 2012, and that's not surprising with all the political grist that he can comment on. So
what will we do without him and an election coming up just around the corner?
I don't think Comedy Central is very happy about the timing of this. I mean, could you please stay one more year? So
well, that's it.
Especially when you look at how much their earnings report and how much audience they've lost because of all these different streams and competition out there. Attracting their audience.
That study you brought up from 2006, if you think about it, that was 10 years ago. So this isn't necessarily a younger generation that's watching them anymore. This is a generation that might be growing up with not just Stewart, but he was the father of a genre. And now you've got Larry Whitmore, John Oliver, you had Colbert come and go, right? And I think that what we're seeing is a shift in expectations for what we want from our news.
I also think there's a shift in where we get our news. I think about David Letterman, who I like to watch because he has a lot of the big newsmakers.
You're an old person.
No, I'm not. No, but I mean, you know what he does? He asks the questions that are all on all of our minds. And I think, Gerry, if you look at media, people are pushing it a little bit.
Well, I think, it's a good point is, about old people. The thing about Jon Stewart is also he's got a very robust second stream. I mean, all of these late night shows, are getting older. Letterman has a median age of 60 for his audience. I mean, they've kind of grown up with him.
Stupid Petrix. I can't get away from Stupid Petrix. What can I tell you?
Well, Jon Stewart was the second host of The Daily Show. Craig Newborn preceded him, and The folks at Viacom say there will be a new host. Gerry, who are they talking about? Do we have any names?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of names being floated out there. I think there's a fair amount of people who would like to see perhaps a woman fill Jon Stewart's role, and certainly
Chelsea Handler?
I've heard that.
Chelsea
but
Clinton?
He also has hired some really funny women on his show. Samantha Bee is very funny. Jessica Williams is very funny. I mean, there's certainly no shortage of people in the comedy world who would love to replace him.
Can I say, I find it fascinating that we've had, about an 7-8 minute discussion, and we've spent the bulk of it talking about Jon Stewart and not Brian Williams. And I don't know what that says, Gerry.
Well, I mean, I think Brian Williams is probably pretty happy to no longer be the focus of the news cycle. And the one thing I do see sort of parallels between the two news events, and I think Jon Stewart, he was very critical of the cable news and the network news, but he did that because I think he really cared about journalism, and I think he forced the Brian Williams of the world to really up their games.
Great stuff. Gerry Smith, our media reporter at Bloomberg News. Elizabeth Cohen out at West Virginia University, our thanks to you, and also our thanks to Brad Adgate, Director of Research at Horizon Media. You are listening to Taking Stock. I'm Carol Master, my co-host Michael McKee. We are just minutes away from the close. This is Bloomberg Radio.